Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, The Basics of Business Development and Sales. My name is Regina Lau, and I will be emceeing the session this evening. Before we begin tonight's presentation, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders past and present and emerging. We are excited to deliver the next webinar in our YEA CPD series, created exclusively for our young engineers. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mr. Rashid Kotwal. Rashid is passionate about helping his clients achieve personal wealth via their business efforts. His vision is to change the way you think and act so your business becomes a true asset which enables you to leave a legacy. Rashid has spent 30 plus years in leadership roles with multinational organizations as well as running a small business. He is passionate about studying human behavior and what makes people tick. Rashid's background as an engineer and IT technologist, coupled with extensive study in psychology, NLP, and other modalities, helps him identify patterns in human behavior, patterns which may serve you and you can do more of, as well as patterns which sabotage your success. At the end of the session this evening, from 6 o'clock to 6:30, Rashid has kindly agreed to stay online with us to answer any further questions you have face-to-face in our Meet the Speaker session. What you see on screen there is just a little guide as to how you go about doing that. So you can see that to participate, you will need a camera and a microphone and have joined our event today via temporary application, browser extension, or the WebEx meeting desktop app. If you would like to participate, please send us a message via Q&A during the session this evening. If you are participating, you will need to turn your camera on and ask your question on screen to Rashid. So with that said, I'll now hand over to you, Rashid, for the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Regina. Can everybody see me? I take it?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Yes.
All right. All right. So as Regina pointed out, so thank you, number one, Regina and Engineers Australia, for inviting me along to this session. And the topic, as we've discussed, is what selling is all about, how to market yourself and sell what you do so you can build relationships with prospects and clients. So I'll just give you a bit of a frame for the next 45 minutes or so as to what we're going to do. We're going to discuss how you can climb the career ladder and have a successful engineering career. And bear in mind, when I was talking to Regina and Kimberly about today's session, she mentioned that most of you would be tended to be early stage engineers, but she also mentioned that a number of you would be mid to later stage engineers. So I've included material that I hope would cover, the full spectrum of your career. We're going to talk about why being technically competent isn't enough if you want to progress your career and really reach the heights that you should be capable of reaching, and why you must become a trusted advisor who brings insights to your clients and not just stay technical with a relatively blinkered approach. We're also going to talk about what selling is all about. We're going to dispel some of the myths, and we're going to look at shifting your mindset as to what is really possible and how you can go about it. We're going to talk about how to listen for some of the issues that your clients want to solve and dig into some of the outcomes that they would want instead. Now, obviously today we're only going to scratch the surface. I can't impart 30 years worth of business development experience in 45 minutes. So if you'd like to speak to me after the session, as Regina pointed out, I will be around for half an hour, and I'll also give you my contact details. So by all means, reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, etc. And I'm more than happy to have a further conversation with you. So let's get into it. So today is all about building solid foundations and preparing for leadership roles. Some of you will want to start your own consultancy down the track. So everything that we talk about today is designed to help you progress the ladder, whether you work for somebody else for your career or you actually start a consultancy for yourself. What we're going to talk about is going to stand you in good stead. A little bit about me. I know that Regina has mentioned a little bit about me, but I actually studied mechanical engineering way back in the late 1970s. So you can tell that I've been around for a while. And in those days, computers were just sort of coming into form. I mean, I actually started with punch cards, so that tells you something. Most of you probably wouldn't even know what a punch card is, but that's by the by. I discovered a passion for the logic of computers. And even though I'm a mechanical engineer, I think, the only person in my cohort and all the years I went through that was actually really interested in computers and CAD/CAM design and that form of engineering. So after I left university, I actually went into the IT industry and spent the next 20 years working for a range of mainly American multinationals in very technical roles, and then moved into sales roles and then leadership roles. And then also moved into working for some reasonably large consultancies as well as some smaller family businesses. And over the last 22 years, my wife, Barbara, and myself have run a consultancy where we work with business owners predominantly and leaders of professional services firms in a range of industries grow their business. And as Regina also pointed out, I'm really passionate about people, dealing with people, which coming from an engineering background where everything has logic, it's quite a different feel. And I realized very early on in my working life that you could have accused me of being rather arrogant. I was rather forceful. I really did call a spade, sometimes a little bit too forcefully. And let's just say it didn't win me too many friends, and I didn't really know how to influence people. And I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn the hard way that it's people skills more than technical skills. The technical skills were very important. They got me to a certain point. But after that point, it was really people skills and those leadership skills and influence skills that really get me or get anybody to another level in their jobs. So let's talk about you. As an early stage career engineer, your focus is likely to be mainly on the delivery of technical solutions. Are you fair? And you're unlikely to get involved in business development of any kind. So really what happens is that you join a company, you've got a particular set of technical skills, you keep honing those technical skills, and you get told basically, here's a problem, you need to go and solve that problem, go away and solve it, and work within a team to do that. But if you want to progress your career, being technically competent won't be enough. You will be expected to bring in business. And I used to see this a lot when I worked with consultancies. And one of the major consultancies I worked with was now Fujitsu Group. It used to be called DMR back in the day. And we worked on really large projects with Qantas and a whole bunch of other people along those lines. And what I noticed was that people who were consultants to senior consultants to even managing consultants basically did that, consult. But the minute you became a principal or a director of the organization or a partner in another way of putting it, you were expected to bring in business, and the role switched dramatically. And I would watch the people suddenly go, oh my God, I'm supposed to bring in business. I had no idea that that was going to be my role. And I have absolutely no idea how to do this. And I think that is a failing sometimes of some of these partnerships or these large consultancies where they don't actually bring people in and they don't actually give them the skills required to climb the ladder. So as a young engineer, you need to develop those skills. And this is where many technical people come unstuck because many young, and I say early stage career engineers, you don't have to be young, think that their job description means that they don't actually have to sell. And they think sales is yucky, and that they have images of the quintessential, used car salesperson or vacuum cleaner salesperson or encyclopedia salesperson if you're my vintage. And while technical skills in any role up to a point should be given, the big career leaps will come from your ability to influence and sell your ideas. Because even in leadership, leadership is bringing people with you. Management is doing things through people. Leadership is bringing people with you. And it is your ability to be able to influence people and bring them on board with you that is going to see you in good stead. And so the people who are really valued in an organization ultimately are the rainmakers, the people who bring in clients. So if there's one message, and we're going to get into some real specifics here, but if there's one message that I can impart to all of you, it's master people skills. Develop emotional intelligence. And yes, you can develop emotional intelligence. We're not all born with it. Some people are born with more empathetic than others, but we can all develop emotional intelligence. If you look at the bookcase behind me, it's full of books on how to deal with people. Now, I don't know if you've come across Daniel Goleman, who in around 1995 wrote the book Emotional Intelligence. And in his book, he talks about the greatest predictor of success in workplace and life is the ability to deal with people and to have and be emotionally intelligent. And he goes further to say that a person's ability to manage his or her feelings so that those feelings are expressed appropriately or effectively is the basis of all leadership and the biggest differentiator between you and, say, a technical peer who maybe doesn't have those skills. And look, I spent, as I said, I spent 20 years in the IT industry, okay? And I was surrounded by highly technical people who would just, they would like nothing better to sit in a corner and write code, or sit in a corner and solve problems. But it's that ability to deal with people, and a lot of those people didn't even know how to deal with team members. So they were a team of one, and it used to be really, really difficult to get them to come out of their shells and to actually start to interact with other people. And it's not that those people were silly, far from it. Some of those people were incredibly smart, and it would really did them and the company that we worked for a disservice by not having them talk, not having them express their ideas, not having them express how we could do things better. So that's something that I really encourage every one of you to be able to do, is to actually get out of your own way, get out of your shell, start to interact, start to talk with other people. So let's talk about who hates the thought of selling. So I realized that I can't see any of you, so and there's really no way of putting up your hand. So I'm just going to assume that probably a number of you hate the thought of selling, and you compare yourselves and think selling is all about that used car salesperson, and you hate the thought of having to convince somebody to buy something that possibly they don't want to buy. And we've all been in those sorts of high pressure situations where somebody really pushes something onto you, and you almost buy for the sake of buying because you feel you can't escape. And then what happens is that buyer's remorse kicks in, and you wonder why the heck you did this, and you really resent the person. And that's not what sales is about. Okay, sales is about collaboration and helping somebody solve a problem. And the word sales actually comes from the Norwegian word selve, which means to serve. And in my world, selling professionally is serving other people for a mutual benefit. So if you think win-win, everything that you do to sell something or to allow somebody to buy something is a win for them, because you've helped them solve a problem. You've helped them realize, number one, that there was a problem, if they didn't already realize there was one. Number two, showed them a solution, showed them a pathway out of it. And by doing so, you get paid as well. So it's an equal exchange. There has to be value on both sides. You've given value and you get value, which is monetary in some cases, but of course also for you it could be career progression and a whole bunch of other things. So if your mindset around sales comes from a place of giving, If you see an opportunity, and this is just a mindset shift, if you see an opportunity to serve somebody by noticing a problem and not mentioning it, maybe not to them directly, maybe you go back to your your management or your the partners in your firm and point it out and say, hey, listen, maybe there's a problem here. You're actually not doing them a favor, and you're not doing yourself a favor. And this is something that we see a lot when we deal. I do a lot of work with consultancy companies, different types of consultancy companies, a lot of engineering companies, but a lot of IT companies. And I remember an instance the other day where I was talking to an IT, the boss and the staff of an IT company, and one of the things that would happen was that they said, "Oh, look, we go out on site and we notice something, or we keep going and fixing the same thing again and again and again." In this particular case, it happened to be a router box that people kept kicking for some reason, and it kept getting disconnected from the wall. And I said, "Well, hang on, okay, so where is this thing?" Okay, oh, it happens to be sitting on the floor. I said, "Well, if it's sitting on the floor and you keep going back, why don't you just suggest picking this thing up, putting it somewhere else, maybe putting it on a shelf somewhere, create a shelf, whatever it is, rather than just going, oh, I've just got to fix this problem again, and not actually adding any value." And I see this time and time again. I've seen this over 30 years of dealing with consultants. And in fact, even as an employee working in IT, I would notice that people just did not want to open up their eyes and say, okay, what else is going on around here? How else can I help this person? Because I would be doing myself a favor ultimately by not having to come back and do all of this. So sales ultimately is a skill that can be learned. Yes, there are innate characteristics. Some people are better at dealing with people at different levels of the organization. Some people are better at dealing with long sales cycles. Some people are better at dealing with short, interactions like a car salesperson. You're constantly turning over cars rather than an IT or a large engineering project, which might take a year or 2 years or 3 years to come to fruition. So there are different preferences, but the skills that you need to deal with people, trust me, can all be learned. So by the end of the day today, I hope that you will want to learn some of those skills and the art and influence of scales. So let's look at why I would suggest that you really do this now. One way or the other, no matter what we think, technical skills are going to become commoditized. Trust me when I say there will always be someone better or cheaper than what we can do here. I remember a friend and client of ours a few years ago had a really nutty uh, mathematical problem to solve, and it was all around color management. He's a professional photographer and color lab owner, and he had, believe it or not, someone in Australia who was a professor at a university who he spent a lot of money with trying to solve this problem, and the guy couldn't solve it for whatever reason. Okay, he went and found somebody in Eastern Europe who solved it within hours and charged him $500 for the privilege. Technical skill is becoming commoditized. So the thing that's going to separate you from everybody else is your people skills, your sales skills, and even if they don't come naturally, learning them will put you in good stead so that you can help other people and you will stand out from other engineers and your peers. And by doing that, you will be in a position to command a premium salary and have far more job security. So whether you're working for somebody else and you get that job security, or you step out on your own, because the key with running any sort of business and any sort of consultancy is you have to be able to bring in clients. I don't care how good you are at doing what you're doing. If you cannot bring in clients, you will ultimately starve. And remember, people get paid least for what they do, and they get most for who they are and the results that they bring and the results that they get for people. So you want to be the rainmaker. So how do you add to your current skills and develop those sales skills? So if you look at your current situation, you're given a problem. Or somebody says, okay, your boss says that there's a problem, and you need to diagnose what this particular problem is, and you have to say, okay, what could be causing this problem, and you have to look at designing a solution. Then you may or may not implement the solution yourself. Okay. If I just add one component to this, the sales mindset is to look around you and observe what's happening. So rather than being told that there's a problem and you need to go and fix it, if you're already in the organization, so let's say you're on a construction site and you notice something going on over there in the corner, or maybe you were having a cup of tea, or you were having lunch with somebody, somebody in the organization, and they keep talking about a particular issue, and you just go, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so why might that be happening? What could be causing that issue? So if we just start chunking it up, okay, so what is the context that this issue could be occurring in? And then saying, okay, is this something that maybe we could help with? And if it is, you could bring it up with the person you're talking to. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, just go back to the organization you work for and say, hey, listen, I've noticed something over here. Is this something that maybe we could do? And even if it's something that you can't fix or your organization can't fix, there's a great deal of merit in actually saying, okay, I happen to know Fred over there in that organization that actually has expertise in this. Would you like me to put you in touch with Fred? People really appreciate the fact that if you don't know how to do something and you know somebody else who can help them, or if this particular thing isn't in your purview and bailiwick, you actually recommend somebody else. People really appreciate the fact that you took the trouble to do that. And this is all about being a trusted advisor. So if you become a trusted advisor, your clients will respect your opinion. Now, some of you are probably going, hey, I'm an introvert. I don't like talking to people. And going to networking functions is an anathema to me. I like sitting in a team meeting. I'm the person who sits in the corner, and I'm pretty quiet. And I really don't like talking over people. And there are other people who are far more forceful than me, and I'm quite happy to let them go, and I'm quite happy to let them talk. Anybody like that? Come on, admit it. We all have some component of that, and there are any number of engineers and technical people who fall into this camp. So let me point this out. Some of the best salespeople I have ever come across are introverts. They're not hail fellow well met. They don't go out there and be the life of the party. They're the exact opposite. And the reason that they are really successful, and this is why I say that engineers can be really, really successful salespeople and really successful leaders, is because they listen. They don't force their opinion on anybody. They have listening and empathy skills, which allows them to diagnose issues, and then, if appropriate, and I say if appropriate, with permission, prescribe solutions. Because nobody wants to be told what to do unless they actually ask. And this is something that we say to people. It's like it's like the classic difference in the way men and women tend to think, as a generalization. Okay? So when a woman says, "Oh, darling, I've got a problem, this, that, and the other," the man generally wants to jump in and solve the problem. The woman just wanted to be heard. If she wanted you to solve the problem, she would ask you. And if you just expand that frame out to a general sales situation, if you see a problem, you might just say to somebody, "Hey, look, I've noticed that. Are you interested? Are you open to talking about it? If not, I won't mention it. But if you are open to mentioning it, are open to talking about it, then this is what I'm seeing. Maybe this is something that we can help you with." So curiosity and empathy, and let's face it, as engineers, we do tend to be curious. We do tend to notice things. And we do tend to be empathetic in our own way. So curiosity and empathy are two of the most effective diagnostic tools that you can have in your work as an engineer and your work as a leader. Now, let's talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty of sales, and I'll get into that in a second. But people ultimately buy things to solve problems. We all buy things to solve problems or gain some outcome. And when we see something, we make an emotional decision as to whether we want to buy it, and then we look at justifying it with logic. And this applies no matter who we're dealing with. I could be dealing with the CEO of a major multinational, or I could be dealing with someone who's buying uh, a relatively cheap commodity item. We all buy an emotion, and then we look to justify our purchase decision with some form of logic. And the logic is, we wanted that. Now, who do we need to convince, including ourselves, as to why we made this decision? So, I made this decision because I liked it, this, that, and the other. And, or it could be that I need to convince my spouse or my boss or even my friends. And, over the years, I've come across some really interesting examples of this. So I met someone years ago, and I said, why did you buy the particular car you bought? And she said, it had two wine bottle holders in the back seat, so the wine bottles would stay upright. That's the reason she bought the car. Now, to me, I'm going, I don't drink a lot of wine. It's not going to make any difference whether the thing rolls around. I couldn't care less, okay? Other people have bought the car because they could press a button and the roof came up and down. Other people have bought things because the color was black. I talked to a lady and I said, why did you buy that particular stereo? And she said the color was black and it matched the decor. So it matched the decor was the emotional, and then the logical reason was, it matches the decor. But the real reason was I just felt good when I bought it, and that was the emotional payoff. But on the other side, if you've ever bought a new car, and you get the brochure from the car manufacturer, you'll notice that it goes from a global to a specific. So the global it starts with the pretty pictures of the car, and it shows you all the different color schemes, etc. And as you go through all of the pages, and sometimes there could be 20 or 30 pages in these brochures, it gets down to gear ratios and cutaways of the suspension, etc., etc. And you go, but who the heck would want to know that? Well, I can tell you, you and me would probably want to know that. So what the car manufacturer is doing is it's catering to the people who want to buy an emotion primarily, and then justify that with logic. So, a classic piece of emotion would be, my EV goes from 0 to 100 in 2.2 seconds. I was listening to the radio this morning. Somebody said that their old EV goes, does that sort of thing, and people want the feeling that this thing's going to really go like a rocket. Now, the reality is, where in Australia are you going to be able to do that anyway? But that's not the point. We buy things on emotion and then want to justify them with logic. So you need to understand what would motivate someone to do something. So if I go over here. I really like this model of a sales pendulum. And I got this model from a colleague of mine, Steve Brosman, and I've added to it. So if we think of a sales pendulum, and this is something that you can actually take away and use tomorrow. If you're talking to somebody about a particular problem, if the pendulum just swings down the bottom towards the problem, not much is going to happen. Because the biggest factor in people not taking any form of action is the status quo. If it's easier to do nothing than to solve the problem, people will do nothing. So with any problem, there has to be a factor of some form of pain that this problem is causing, and some sort of gain or aspiration that these people want instead. And so Realize though that pain always motivates people to take an action more than an aspiration or a gain. So for every problem, what you need to do is you need to look for what is the logical impact that this problem might be having. And then look at the logical impact and then say, okay, what is the emotional impact as well? And then on the other side, if I'm going to solve this particular problem, what do they want instead? What is the logical impact and what is the emotional impact? And the greater the swing, the more likely it is that somebody is going to do something or not do something. So I'll give you a couple of examples of how just going for the positive emotional impact is fine. People are really drawn towards something that they really want, but sometimes not having enough fire will stop them at the first hurdle. So I know a lot of you watching this are likely to be older, and you would be quite familiar with network marketing and Amway in particular. And so back in the day, Amway had this great philosophy where you showed people the plan, and the plan was back in those days that you could earn $200,000 or $300,000 a year, which then was a lot of money within 3 to 5 years, and all you had to do was build a network. Sounds great in theory, doesn't it? And so you were taught that you needed to ring your friends and family first and ask them if you could go and show them the Amway marketing plan. And so what would happen is people would get really enthused because they'd look at the wonderful lifestyle that people could have. They had this wonderful book, they had these videos of people on holiday, this great life, etc., etc. And they'd say, I want that life. This is fantastic. I really want that life. And I'd say, okay, so make a list of your friends and family to start with. And what we're going to do is we're going to ring them up and we're going to invite them to a business meeting. And so they'd say, fine, okay. So they make the list and they pick up the phone and they phone the first person. And the first reaction back then, everybody knew about Amway. And the first thing would be, is it Amway? And poor newcomer would sort of stutter and stammer and go, yes. Click. Second phone call. Is it Amway? Click. By the third or fourth phone call, they'd quit. Because the emotional gain was great, but the pain of taking action was too great. So if the pain had been really great, if they were going to go, if the sheriff was at the door and was going to take away all of their worldly possessions, the chances are they probably have done something. But if the pain isn't great enough, people aren't actually going to take action. So you really have to understand that every problem has to have a logical impact and an emotional impact. So a logical impact would be, for pain, am I going to lose money? Is it going to cost me more time? An emotional impact is it going to risk my status? Is it going to risk my position in a company? Maybe if it doesn't work, it's going to go south. I'm going to lose my job. Is it going to cost me energy? Is it going to cost me, am I going to have capability to do this? Okay. So if there isn't enough pain, they won't actually move forward. So our job in sales is to figure out why somebody would take action and then swing that pendulum backwards and forwards, bigger and bigger arcs until they decide that they want to take action. So there are 6 things that motivate us in some combination. And those 6 things are money, time, status, well-being, capability, and energy. So we all want to save time or make time. We all want to save money or make money. But the thing that usually stops deals cold, especially in any sort of corporate business environment, is status and recognition. Because people are afraid of risk. If I'm going to buy this thing and take your advice and do this thing, what is the risk to me? Is there a risk that it won't work out? If there's a risk it won't work out, then I'm not going to go for this. If there's a risk that I could lose my job, I'm not going to do this. If it's a risk that it's going to take more energy because I'm going to have to put in a whole bunch of work, I'm not going to do this. If it's a risk of capability, I'm going to be shown up because I don't know how to do this, I'm not going to do it. So when we're dealing with people, it is very important to figure out what their individual motivation is for doing something and what would get them to want to give you the okay to move this thing forward. The other fundamental model is when you're working with organizations, you need to have the ability to network, navigate, and negotiate your way through the organization. And this would hold you in good stead no matter where you are in life and what you're doing. So if we look at those in turn, if we look at networking, the fundamental of networking is it's not what you know or who you know, it's actually who knows you and what you're known for. Because if you look at any sales situation, the person who contacts you asking for help, knowing what you do, is twice as likely to actually do something and take action than somebody you reach out to cold. And so to become known for knowing something, you need to become the trusted advisor, the credible expert. It's like it's like being a top surgeon. Okay, the top surgeon in this country, top surgeons in this country don't advertise. They get referred to. People refer them. They don't have to talk about their, how good they are. People just understand how good they are. But that takes years to build up. So how do you go about building up that reputation, no matter where you are on the career ladder? So my thing with building up reputation is always publish, always be on LinkedIn, join professional groups, but don't lurk in the background. So very often we see people joining groups, they join networking groups, but they never actually say boo to a goose. They don't actually talk to anybody. The way to get known is to have opinions and express those opinions and listen to other people's opinions. And whenever you hear something, you can do two things. One is you can say, that's interesting. Yeah, yes, but I have a different slant on it. Or, yes, and I have this and I've got to add this to it. Because we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Nothing that we do, comes out of thin air. We've all learned something from other people. And it's this amalgamation of stuff that we do that actually makes us really successful. And so you need to contribute and get really, my thing is don't have a resume, have a really good LinkedIn profile. And the really good LinkedIn profile needs to talk about who you are, but more importantly, what people get with working with you. Because nobody really cares about you. They all care about themselves. It's the old "what's in it for me" rule. So I remember you hearing this particular story, a very long time ago. It was about Disraeli, who was the British Prime Minister back in the 1800s, I think, from memory. Anyway, so Disraeli was the story is Disraeli was sitting next to this lady dowager, and basically at the end of the evening, somebody asked the dowager what she thought of Disraeli, and she said, "Oh, he was an absolutely wonderful man, and he was a really great conversationalist." The irony was Disraeli said hardly anything. He basically sat there and he listened, and he just asked questions to get the other person talking. So the dowager basically just loved him because what are we all interested in? We're all interested in ourselves. We're interested in talking about ourselves. So if you can go and you can talk about the other person and ask them enough questions just to steer a conversation, they will really like you. They'll get to know you, and believe it or not, they'll get to trust you because of that. And at some point, they will turn around and ask you about yourself. So always start with the other person. Don't start with yourself. Don't say how great I am and this is all the stuff I do. Nobody gives a rat's ass about it. Okay? So when you're navigating an organization, you need to understand who's who in the organization. And every organization has a formal and an informal network. And the bigger the organization, the greater the disparity between, what's written on the organizational chart of who reports to whom and who actually controls things. Okay? And I remember one of my corporate jobs way back in the early 90s. A new person came along into the organization and he needed some help. And I said, look, go and talk to so-and-so in that location. And they went and talked to so-and-so, and so-and-so immediately said, not my job. Why are you coming to talk to me? Okay? Yeah. Fellow came back to me and he said, look, this is what happened. And I said, wait a minute. I picked up the phone. I said, go back. Okay? Because it comes down to the relationships that you form. Yes, he would have helped if he'd had a relationship with the person. My thing in every job that I've had, I would go out of my way to help people solve problems. Help people in other departments solve problems. And by doing that, if I ever needed something, all I had to do was ask, and people would bend over backwards to do it for me, because the ratio of me helping somebody else to them helping me, or me asking them for something, was probably 5-1 or even 10-1. And if you have that mindset of just going out there and being of service, you will have a reputation for really being someone that is a trusted advisor. And in a sales scenario, you need to know exactly who is who in the zoo, so that you can figure out who's involved in the decision to move something forward. And then negotiating. Effective selling is actually a people game. It's all about, you're selling to a person, you're not selling to a company. Companies don't buy. Companies are inanimate objects. People buy. And people buy from people. People buy from people because they know, like, and trust them. And so with every deal, and this is something that's a more advanced topic, and I'm putting this in for those of you who are later stage and actually in sales. Every person that you are selling to has a personal agenda and a business agenda, and those two things might not be the same thing. So in a small organization like ours, the owner of the organization, what's good for me is good for the business. But the bigger the organization, the greater the possible disparity of what's good for the organization and good for the person making a decision to either buy or possibly just influence and kibosh the sale. I'll give you an example out of one of my clients in engineering. So he is one of Australia's foremost experts in Factory 4. He set up things like Coca-Cola in Eastern Creek, which is a dark factory. So it means that there's almost nobody in the factory anymore. Lights off. The production just goes. And one of the roadblocks that he would come across quite a lot was he'd be talking to a manufacturer, and the board and the owners of the business would say, this is fantastic, we need to do this. But the deal would get kiboshed by, say, the technical plant manager. And the technical plant manager would kibosh the deal because he or she is going, oh, this wasn't invented here, or I'm going to lose my job, or I don't have the capability. This whole thing is going to look bad. Why didn't I think of it in the first place? And they kibosh the deal. And it happens time and time again. So it's really important when you're navigating an organization to understand who's who in the zoo and what could stop a deal. Another instance out of the IT industry, and this happens a lot, is when you're selling, you need to sell to the business. The business has to make a decision. There has to be a business case. There has to be some reason for them to do this. But very often that involves something in IT, something in technology. And the IT department goes, not invented here. We could do this ourselves. Or this is going to take more work for us and we don't want to put in the work. The third example is when you're dealing with users. Now, most of you aren't likely to deal with users, but sometimes you may well be. So I've seen instances, in fact, one of the worst ones I saw of this was a a large steel company who spent 2 years putting together an SAP system. They had 100 people in a suburb in Chatswood, if you know Sydney, and they'd spent 2 years putting the system together. And they decided to go live over a weekend. The next Monday morning, the whole thing shut down because the users in the site that they went live with couldn't use the system and refused to use the system. 2 years worth of work went down the toilet because nobody actually involved the users. And it's something that we see time and time again. So you need to change your approach from selling to collaboration. You need to talk to the business, you need to talk to the technical users, technical people, and you need to talk to the users. And I also suggest if you're dealing with multiple stakeholders, you need somebody who can help you navigate what we would call a coach. Now, that person doesn't have to be somebody in the organization, but it's somebody who knows the layout of the organization and who's who in the zoo and who could possibly block a sale and how they need to navigate throughout the situation. Now, we go into all of this in a lot of depth when we work with consultancies, because this is both an art and a science. There's a lot of art behind this, but there's also a lot of science as to how we go about doing this. So I'm going to just finish off in the next few minutes with the story of Carlos. It's a bit of a fun story. So 21 years ago, Barbara and I had moved into a new house, and this place had a fireplace. And Barbara's from Switzerland, and we said, "Oh, look, we really like the fire. Let's see how this thing works." And of course, fires cause soot and all sorts of other crap. Let's put it that way. And we said, "Oh, okay. So what's the best way of cleaning this? Well, let's vacuum it up." Now, we didn't want to use our decent vacuum cleaner, even though it was a 15-year-old Wertheim. We didn't want to use that. And we said, "Okay, let's go off to Godfrey's and buy a cheap $20, $30 vacuum cleaner that we can use." Right? So we toddled off across town to Godfrey's, and there's me, an engineer. I'm standing, and there's this cage in front of me with piles and piles and piles of vacuum cleaners, just dumped. Okay, and I'm going, okay, well, yeah, how do I choose? Let's just choose something. What does it matter? What is it going to matter? And this guy walks up, and picture this squat, pretty rotund Spaniard. I found out he was a Spaniard later, but his name was Carlos. And the first thing Carlos said to me was, "I'm a technician. I'm not a salesperson at Godfrey's. I'm a technician. And you see those vacuum cleaners over there? They're junk. That one over there, that'll last you 30 minutes. That one over there, I reckon if you get a couple of hours out of it, you're going to be lucky." He says, "I repair these things day in and day out. That's junk." I'm going, "Oh, okay, I'm an engineer. This resonates. I want quality rather than something cheap that's going to break in 2 hours." So he said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "Oh, look, I'm looking for a vacuum cleaner to, clean out the fireplace, etc., etc." And he said, "Oh, look, come over here. Let me just show you some vacuum cleaners." Okay? So we toddle out to the front, and he does the usual, takes out a number of different vacuum cleaners, a Dyson and a this and a that and the other, and vacuums up lint off the carpet and sand off the carpet, and all the way through he's asking questions, he's diagnosing, he's forming a level of rapport with me, and he realized that I was technical, I was interested in quality, I was interested in the technical stuff behind it. So he started talking about things like the triple filter and the this and the that and the other. And of course, and I'd said at one point, we had a 15-year-old Wertheim, it was still going. And he said, "Oh, Wertheim, you're German excellence. It's one of the best brands on the market." And I'm going, click, 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 click. This is all relating back to me. And then he did the usual, if you've ever watched the Godfrey's ad, they put a bowling ball onto the nozzle and they pick up the bowling ball. Well, he went one better. The hose comes out of the top of the vacuum cleaner, so he unplugged the hose and he had this huge hand, and he basically went slam onto the vacuum cleaner, turned it on full, and picked up this vacuum cleaner. And I reckon it must be about 10 to 15 kilos. Okay, he literally picked this thing up, so this vacuum cleaner is hanging off his hand, and I'm going, "Oh, okay, right." And as he's talking, he says, "Oh, okay, so you know, Godfrey's this weekend, bit of scarcity, okay? Godfrey's this weekend is offering a $500 discount on a trade-in. You mentioned you had a word time. We're giving a $500 discount on the trade-in." Barbara and I looked at each other and said, "Oh, okay, that's a pretty good deal." Notice at no point he talked about price. So we start walking towards the counter and we look at each other and we say, "Oh, by the way, what's the price?" Well, suffice to say, we walked out having spent $800 when we walked in thinking we were going to spend 20. So what's the real lesson here? Your existing clients or people who actually understand what it is that they've already got are the best advertisement for quality moving on. Price only comes in when value hasn't been established. He established the value. As far as we were concerned, we had value. That vacuum cleaner still works, by the way. It works perfectly well, 21 years later. Okay? He developed trust with us because he said he was a technician, not a salesperson. And it's exactly the same with your clients. Your clients develop trust with you because they think that you're an expert. And in fact, they should know that you're an expert at what you do. And that makes you a trusted advisor. So you're not somebody who's just coming in and trying to sell them something for the sake of something. You're actually coming in there to solve a problem. They understand, your clients understand, just like Carlos did. He had a deep understanding of issues and what could go wrong and what I would be looking for. He had rapport with me. He could highlight the important stuff to me. He asked the questions to find out what was important to me. He didn't go off on all sorts of rattles and tangents. He didn't force any form of hard close. He didn't say, "Hey, listen, you need to press hard, you know, old insurance salesman trick, press hard, 3 copies, here's the pen, shove it in your eye." Okay? He basically just made a soft offer. He said, "Look, this is available." He allowed us to buy it. It's exactly the same thing that I would recommend that you do when you're talking to potential clients. Now, obviously, you know, Carlos is not necessarily, you know, in its linear form relevant to everybody here. But what I'd like you to really do is to take away some of the lessons that you could learn from somebody. And oh, by the way, Carlos really was a technician because I phoned his area manager, you know, on the Monday after the Saturday, and said to congratulate him, and he said, "Yeah, he really is a technician." So to wrap up, people skills trump technical skills. Yes, you have to be good at what you do, but ultimately your career progression and your climbing the ladder will depend on how well you can deal with people. And that's people in your own organization and people external to your organization. And big career leaps come from your ability to influence and to sell your ideas and to become a rainmaker. So I'm going to give you a couple of free gifts. This is a comprehensive guide on how to elegantly lead your next sales conversation. And you can either take out your phone or scan the QR code. The QR code does work, or you can go to the website revealedresources.com /selling-with-integrity. And on our site, we have well over 1,000 articles and I think 180 last count videos on how to improve your business skills, your leadership skills, your strategic skills, your sales and marketing skills. So that's just one of the free items that we have on our website. So if you go to the website, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff that you can have a look at. And if you'd like to connect with me, please do so. My LinkedIn profile is LinkedIn Rashid Koppel. Just look for me. That's my phone number. That's my email address. And if you're a consultant or professional services firm leader who would like help improving and developing your people so that they basically become better at sales and leadership and developing business, please do reach out. And that's the end of today. So if you've got any questions, I'm going to be around. please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Rashid. Certainly very informative and engaging for myself included. What we'll actually do, I'm mindful of the time at the moment, so we're just coming up to 6 o'clock. So what I will actually get everybody to do for those who are interested, as I mentioned at the start of the session this evening, that you have kindly agreed to stay on with us for another half an hour for our attendees, to have the opportunity to meet with you. So for those of you who are interested to do that, a couple of instructions for you. So as I mentioned, you will need to have, a camera as well as a mic. And what Natalia will support us with is, in a second, there should be 3 dots that will appear in the center of the screen. Click raise hand tool now, and you will be able to stay online with us. So the instructions are there as well on screen now. Great, I can see Barbara and Mark online with us there. Okay, so I may give everybody a couple more minutes to join us, Rashid, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfectly fine. I'm here. I'll stay as long as people have questions. That's fine.
Okay, I've just changed my view as well, so I can see the attendees that have stayed on. Okay, so we may get this part of the session started. Before we do that, I would like to thank everybody again for their time for joining us this evening. A recording of this session is going to be made available on Engineers Australia's video viewing platform, which is EA On Demand. Okay, so what I'm going to do is invite the attendees that we've got online with us, Rashid, to turn their cameras on, please, and unmute, and I'll get them to pose their questions to you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I can see Hayden, I can see that you're speaking here on my screen, but I can't hear you.
I should have been on mute. Sorry, I'm trying to work out how to view on, but I think I need to download the desktop app.
Oh, okay. I can hear you now. Rashid, can you hear him
I can hear
okay?
it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, while Hayden sorts out the IT side of things, which is always challenging, isn't it? It never quite cooperates when
It never
you need
cooperates
it
when you
to.
need it.
It never cooperates, I know. So I may just open it up to the others that have stayed online with us. And yes, please unmute and ask away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you very much. Firstly, thank you, Rashid, for your presentation. Look, I've been actually just gone from a much more sales engineering, that whole trusted advisor thing, into the builder side. And at the moment, I'm looking at, and I really feel what you said there on the change in terms of from being the technical, which is most people in their first 4 years, it's super technical, it's all this sort of stuff, and then it sort of opens up. I guess the question I had, and this is this is because of a technology I use. I didn't use it for very long, but it basically, like you said, it's more about knowing who's in the business, who the blockers are, and all that sort of thing. And I had this modeling thing that first question was, do you use models and models to in the way that you find success in your clients? And secondly, like technology with modeling. I had a technology that basically would go into all of my platforms and it put every business into categories, and then I could click on a business and I'd have all their names there, their contact details, how often I interact with them. Yeah, what would be your best advice to sort of merge into this new age of technology and not get overwhelmed by it, I guess, because it's sort of like you start something and then you don't know how far to go because you start losing a lot of time. So yeah, just I guess merging that development and being out there and like networking, like you said, and going into the world. How do we, what's your best advice on, I guess, doing that, going out into the new technical world and I guess merging with it and collaborating with others?
Okay, so let me just ask a couple of clarifying questions. When you say go out into the world and modeling, what are we talking about how you keep track of things, or what is it that you're really asking?
Yeah, I guess more so what technologies and things like that are out there to assist us, like the warehouse you were talking about. It's got barely any people in it and whatnot now, which obviously creates a lot of profits and this and that. And I guess for me at the moment, networking is really good if you're using a lot of the technologies and you're going to the things, but it can get overwhelming because there's so many of them now. Like
Okay.
when you had that other networking thing where you call someone, everybody knew the one company, but now there's a million companies. How do we choose? And what would be what's your thoughts on technology and being an operator, I guess?
Okay, so I guess okay, so there are two sides to this question, really. Okay, so how would somebody find you is maybe one side of it, and then how do you keep track of who you're talking to is maybe another side of it.
Hmm.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess the more people you talk to and the more relationships you build as well, it becomes a lot pretty quick. And I think I guess it's not really sales or business development range, but I guess modeling's coming bigger with us and in our business. And I've sort of come from that side where I'm trying to be a solutions engineer. I'll come up with a solution to a something. But now it's like a million doors have opened again, and the world of COVID's come out, and we can go out and network again. But there's so many aspects, so many of them to do. And I
Okay.
guess I don't want to start. I don't want to start and stop things.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is uh, okay. So if you think of a Venn diagram, okay, with experience, expertise, and essence, and you say, okay, what is my particular expertise? What is my particular experience? And who am I as a person? And say, okay, who are because we can't be everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you feel would be the best customer for you? What sort of area of engineering would your experience, your expertise, and who you are as a person, your own personality, be best suited for? That would be the first thing. Okay. So if you go everybody in the world and you keep narrowing this down to say, okay, so everybody in the world, and you could say, okay, it's a particular industry. Let's just say it's construction. If it's construction, is it home construction? Is it commercial construction? Is it bridges? Is it tunnels? What is it? Okay. And you just keep narrowing it down until you get to one person. And that one person that you can identify and say, this person is my ideal avatar, if you like. This person is my ideal persona. Okay? Then you say, okay, who do I know and how do I get in front of that person or people like that person? Okay? I think the risk is that we get hung up on technology and we get hung up on customer relationship management systems and modeling and this and that and the other. Whereas we have to just realize that sometimes a simple approach and saying, okay, Ultimately, maybe you need 150 people, maybe 200 people in your network that can feed you really well. So who would those 200 people be? And to get to those 200 people, maybe you need to know 1,000 people that are sort of orbiting your network. Okay. And then you basically say, okay, so how do I keep in touch with those people? So there are a number of ways. Okay, without getting into a lot of technology, if you use LinkedIn in a professional sense, that would be one. If you basically comment, like other people's stuff, you comment on it, they start to see who you are, and you start at some point forming a relationship, whether the relationship is via email, and then at some point you pick up the phone, and then you just log the fact that I have a customer relationship management piece of software, runs on the cloud. I just log notes, say, okay, this is what I said to so and so. This is what I did. This is what Next time I go back and I just read the notes and say, okay, what was it that I spoke about? Oh, person went on holiday or whatever. I ask, and then just keep moving the relationship forward. So I think the thing is not to overcomplicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head with narrow it down. It's that's a good point. I'm not sorry about that. It was a bit of a strange question, but I think for a lot of people that building the skills and like what you just said there, narrowing it down to 150 and you can't be everything to everybody is probably some good things to know about when you're starting out. So
yeah, you can't be the jack of, it's the old thing. You can be the jack of all trades and master of none. Okay, you're far better off being known for knowing something, as long as there are enough people in the world that want that thing and are willing to pay for it.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you.
That's all right. Pleasure.
Great. Thanks for that, Troy. Anybody else that have stayed on with us this evening? From what I can see, I think, Rashid, there are 12 of us here in the Meet the Speaker session.
Let's go.
Yeah. Hi, Regina. It's Ian Garrett here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can. Thanks,
Okay,
Ian.
great. Thanks. I'm actually in a similar situation to what Troy just described there, except I've gone government side instead of builder side, coming from a professional technical services, technical advisor kind of organization. So I've had a lot of the experience being part of that organization with the sales and BD processes, and it's certainly not the reason I left that. I miss it and get a bit of a rush out of the process. My question for you, Rashid, was around sort of when to introduce people to sales and BD. You mentioned in your presentation the partner level, sort of allowing senior consultants and even principal consultants to consult, and then partners and directors and whatnot doing the more business development sales kind of activities. Obviously those partners and directors need to come from somewhere, and ultimately that pool is our current engineering graduates. When, in your opinion, is too young to, if there is such a thing, to expose young graduates and maybe graduate consultants to sales and BD?
Okay, I'd say there's no such thing as too young, because the earlier they start, and look, you don't have to say to somebody, hey, listen, your role is now to go out and sell, because you're going to freak them out. Okay, unless they really enjoy that side of it. But if you say to somebody, hey, listen, just do what you normally do in life, which is you're probably good at observing things. You're probably good at noticing problems, and you're probably going to yourself, oh, gee, why is that happening over there? And oh, gee, what an idiot. Why are they doing that? Okay, you may not say anything, but you're probably observing it. So if we look at a behavior that somebody is already doing, and we say, okay, how do we just translate that behavior into another sphere where it's useful? So rather than, if you say to them, look, just observe when you're out on a site, what's going on, who's having conversations in the tea room, because that's where a lot of business is done. A lot of stuff happens when we used to be in corridors having conversations. I mean, look, COVID has killed a lot of that, but in construction and whatever, you've got to be on site. You're going to be talking to people. So just observe and say, listen, if you observe, if you keep your eyes and ears open, and you just think, okay, what could be causing this particular problem, and then come back to us and say, hey, listen, I noticed this. Is this something that maybe we can do something? And then your role is to never say, hey, that was a really stupid thing. Okay, you don't want to kill somebody's enthusiasm, obviously. You want to say, okay, look, that's really interesting. Why don't you let's talk about what's going on with this thing. Why would this thing be happening? What's the overall concept that's going on? And what's the context that this thing must be happening within? And then just start that conversation and encourage them to keep their eyes open, and then say, okay, now you've got a fair bit of skill, you've done this a number of times. Okay, so how about we go and we just have a conversation with the client, and I'll come with you, and you can run the conversation and say, hey, listen, I noticed this thing, and it just gives them a bit of moral support because you're there. They don't feel as if they're they've just been dropped in it. And then if you find that it's sort of going off the rails, you can rescue them and say, no, I just hang on a second, I'll just take over. Okay, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Cheers.
Great, thanks for that, Ian.
One thing actually I wouldn't mind discussing is the fact of the importance of having a really good mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Because over the last 12 to 18 months, I've sort of been thrown in the absolute deep end of having to go and basically learn business development and sales from scratch by myself. And I've just recently picked up one of my old bosses as a mentor, and I've actually found that quite invaluable.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that that's an invaluable thing. Every one of us needs to have mentors, and we need to have coaches and people. Okay, so I'm in my, well, I'll be 63 this year. Okay, so I'm not, I've been around the block a few times. We still spend a significant amount of money having mentors and coaches working with us. I'm talking, and this comes out of our pocket. This is our business. It comes out of our pocket. We have spent huge, significant amounts of money over 20 years on mentors. So, and that's because we work for ourselves. In any organization, I would have said it would have been invaluable for me to have had a mentor when I was younger, to say, hey, listen, Rashid, you're being a dick. Okay, you need to do this instead of that, or you're pissing off so and so because you're really quite arrogant, or whatever it is. Okay, and I made it a point to always mentor people. Sometimes the person's boss, actually, in one particular case, I remember the person's boss actually didn't like me at all because he felt that I was steering this person onto a different path in the organization, and the boss thought he should be going here. And I said, well, I reckon, I said, look, it's not up to me to tell him where to go. He wants to do this. I'm here. I'm just helping him. And it's interesting that happened, what, 30 years ago? To this day, I mean, he sent me a Facebook message a little while ago saying that he remembered this, and the fact that I went out of my way to help, a young guy who was looking for direction, et cetera, et cetera. Right? People really appreciate the fact that, yes, you can be a mentor, but you also need a mentor. So, I'd encourage you to find somebody. If you don't have somebody who's been there, done that, and say, okay, this is how you steer the path of sales, business development, because it is a skill. We weren't all born learning how to deal with people. And especially when you're dealing with large organizations and you're dealing with complex sales, there are a whole bunch of moving parts, and you really need to know how to navigate. Is that enough?
Great, thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else with any questions or comments for Rashid this evening?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Thanks, Clive.
Okay, I've got, well, actually, I'm a mechanical engineer and I started with punch cards too, so I'm one person in the audience who recognised your reference. I've got an idea for an area where I'd like to go into business for myself. I'm now in the situation where I've got enough super that it doesn't have to make good money or whatever. But I can see two areas within the area of business that I want to go to, and one is sort of a commodity, $250 per consult, because I'm aiming at the residential market, but I want to try and think of something broader. If you got where I'm going to get like $1,000 or $2,000 from a single transaction rather than $250 from a single transaction. Have you got any thoughts on how to go about finding a broader, higher value market around a particular idea?
Yeah, and that's quite a long conversation. Because I know nothing about what it is that you're actually selling and what the expertise is and what is the value. So ultimately people buy things to solve problems. Okay, so they've got a problem and they want a different outcome. So that's on one side. If you think of a triangle, let me just see. Just give me a second. I'll see if I've got a slide on this, and I will show you what I mean. Just bear with me. Okay. Slide. All right. Tell me if you can see that. All right. So when we work with consultancies or salespeople anyway, you say, okay, so what is the problem that you solve? What is the problem? What is the outcome you get? So what is the message that you're taking to the market? And then the big factor, of course, here is who is it for? So as I said before, you've got to narrow this down into who is the market that you're actually dealing with. If it's a residential market, where are they? What sort of size? How do they think? What is the problem? And then, of course, you've got to be able to get in front of them. And this is the key. And then you've got to know how to convert them into clients. So it's a relatively detailed topic. I'm happy to talk about it offline. If you want to contact me, by all means. Have you got my contact details? And we can have a look at that. So it's a long answer to a difficult question.
On that, Rashid, actually, it would be great if you can share the last slide that you had
Yes,
from
I
your
certainly-
presentation,
I
just to
certainly
remind
can.
those who are online with us that they've got your contact details along with your LinkedIn profile. That would be great.
I can do that. Okay, does that show up?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have time for one more question? And this might also be a long one, so just tell me.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm also a fairly late career, but I've recently gone into consulting from being in utilities for a long time. I am specialized in certain areas, but the organization who's actually headhunted me specialized in what they call advisory work. And while they wanted me because I've got a very long career in water and I understand a lot about it, and they said they wanted a jack of all trades, I find it difficult to get my head around business development in advisory when I'm not actually known to be an advisor. So while I was in utilities, I had various management roles, but I wasn't actually in the asset creation side of it. And that's pretty much the advisory area they work in. But I understand everything about it. Like I do understand it. It's just going to customers and saying that I'm an expert, I find that quite difficult. But when I'm actually confronted with a business case that I deliver, I can write it because I know everything about the business and the environment I'm working in. But yeah, I don't know if you've got any advice for me on whether I should just get out of it and get into a business that actually has a very narrow niche for me. But I've worked in very many different roles in utilities, so I can't say that I'm a particular expert in anything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to
Okay. So
voice.
do you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll answer it this way. Do you know more than the average person that you're dealing with?
I probably do, yes, but not about everything that they know. So I would tend to deal with a specialist who would have deeper knowledge than I have, but I can bring a huge amount of context to him that or her that they may not have.
And that's the key. That's the key. You hit the nail on the head. Okay. So if you think of it this way, okay. So if you think some people are more global thinkers, and they think context, and they think about the concepts, and then there are people who think about all the stuff, and they get really nitty-gritty detail and get lost in the detail. So they go down rat holes. Okay. If your skill is to be able to provide context, so if you can listen to somebody's story and then chunk it up to provide a context for what's going on and say, oh, okay, given what you want to do, I understand the bigger picture, the global picture, if you like, and say, that's what you need here, here, and here. And oh, by the way, I've got an expert here, here, and here. Because the danger with the expert is going to go, I've got a hammer and everything's a nail.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
going, hey, I'm the architect and I know who needs a hammer and who needs a saw and who needs a whatever, nail gun.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that sounds great. Thank you.
I would say that you've got a great deal of expertise and you would add a great deal of value to an organization by being a problem solver and saying, hey, listen, my job is to not solve the nitty-gritty problem. My job is to come in and tell you what the real problem is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Great,
so
thank
they
you.
think this is the problem. The real problem is this. And then you're the trusted advisor.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then you're really valuable because you're known for being able to pinpoint what's really going on in a whole range of different areas. So you don't have to be the expert in all of them. You just have to know how to chunk up.
Yes, yes, okay.
Okay.
No, I think yeah, that's great.
Great, thanks for that. And I can see, Rashid, I don't know if you can, but a number of those in line with us taking notes. So definitely great advice this evening. I'm going to have to end it there, I'm afraid, everybody. I mean, I encourage all of you to connect with Rashid. His contact details disappeared, Rashid, but there we are. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. I can see it again. Thank you so much for that. As I mentioned at the end of the webinar part, we will be looking at uploading the session this evening. That normally takes about 2 weeks for our team to do that. So definitely check EA on demand, I'd say in a fortnight's time. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us this evening, and have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Rashid, we're in the practice session.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I think everything went well.
Yes, it did seem